Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. The psychologically devastating effects of solitary confinement have been well documented. Humans are social creatures, so to cut someone off from all human contact and limit them to a single room for prolonged periods of time has serious impact on their psyche. Solitary confinement causes the mind to shut down and the prisoner to become hopeless. Just a few days in solitary can cause depression, anxiety, and paranoia. Prisoners that have been in solitary for a year or more often lose all ability to function outside of their cell, experiencing severe agoraphobia when they finally leave. Some prisons, however, have taken solitary confinement to a whole new level, combining isolation with complete sensory deprivation. This is a treatment known as white torture. Prisoners are put into a cell with no windows and no furniture. The walls, floor and ceiling are painted a blinding white. Bright fluorescent lights in the ceiling are positioned in such a way as to eliminate shadows inside the cell. These lights stay on for 24 hours a day. The prisoner is fed only plain white rice, which is passed to them silently through a hatch in the door. There is absolutely no contact with any other people, not even guards. The prison staff even wear cushioned slippers to muffle their footsteps as they pass the cell. The silence becomes deafening. A prisoner kept in these conditions will soon begin to hallucinate. The human brain has a need for sensory patterns, and so it will create them when none exist. A paper published in 2015 found that just 15 minutes of sensory deprivation can lead subjects to experiencing perpetual disturbances, paranoia, and anhedonia, that is, the inability to feel pleasure. It's no wonder then that people kept in the white room for extended periods of time can often have a full mental breakdown and experience lasting psychosis even after they're released. The practice of white torture has widely been reported in Iran. A number of journalists that were imprisoned have reported being subjected to the white room ordeal. Something they say which is far worse than the beatings and shackles that they experienced in other prisons. In 2014, a journalist named Amir Abbas Fakhravar was arrested by Iranian Revolutionary Guards and thrown into a completely white, windowless cell. His clothing was also white and he was given plain rice on a white disposable plate to eat. If he wanted to use the toilet, he had to pass a blank piece of paper under the door to his guards. After his release, Fakhravar fled to the United States. He describes his experience like this: "I was there for 8 months, and after those months, I couldn't remember my father and my mother's face. When they released me from that prison, I was not a normal person." Every prison in Iran has a number of isolation cells. These are 1 meter by 2 meter rooms with a toilet and a sink. A light is kept on 24 hours a day. The walls are painted white and the floor is made of a dusty chalk substance. A former detainee named Masoud Benoud describes his time in these cells. "In the first few hours, it is very hard. You have never been this close to walls in your life. You don't want to sit because it's chalk and you're not used to sitting on chalk. You stand, you pace, you start to get dizzy. After you get dizzy, you lean on a wall. After 3 or 4 hours, your legs get tired and you sit, and then you scream and no one hears you. And you feel like they are holding you, like they're physically holding you. Your hair and nails grow faster. A lot of prisoners say that solitary is like being like the dead in their coffins, because we heard that the dead's nails grow in their coffins." There is no sound. once in a while you'd hear the call to prayer. After 3 days it becomes so difficult. Different people break at different times. Some people broke after a few days. Some could last much longer. It is absolute silence. After 3 days I just wanted any words, even if it was swearing, even if it was harsh interrogation. Another journalist, Ibrahim Nabavi, also spent time in the Evin prison white rooms. About it, he says, "Since I left Evin, I have not been able to sleep without sleeping pills. It is terrible. The loneliness never leaves you, long after you are free, every door that closes on you. This is why we call it white torture. They get what they want without ever having to hit you." Iran isn't the only place to use white torture, of course. One of the most extreme examples I've heard of was used by American forces in 1970 against a colonel from the North Vietnamese security service named Oyen Thai. In 1970, Thai was on an espionage mission in South Vietnam and was captured and tortured by the South Vietnamese military. After months of beatings, electroshocks and water torture, they failed to extract any useful information from him, and so he was handed over to the Americans. Oyen Thai was thrown into a bare, windowless white room with a hole in the floor to use as a toilet. Bright lights in the ceiling were kept on 24/7. Now, I don't know much about Vietnamese culture, so forgive me if this isn't accurate at all. This article I found states that, to a Vietnamese, a sudden chilliness indicates that the wind may have entered the pores of the body, possibly causing immediate fainting and death. And so, in order to exploit this belief, Oyen Thai's cell was continuously blasted with cold air in order to unnerve him. And if that wasn't enough, they also messed with his sense of time. He would get 3 meals a day, but they'd be given to him at random times. One day breakfast might be at 8 AM, the next day it might be at midnight. This lack of a regular mealtime, plus the fact that he wasn't able to see the sun, meant that he was unable to get into a routine that let him know how much time had passed. The days crawled by with a painful slowness. He was kept in this cell without any human contact for 3 whole years before interrogation began. Where physical torture had failed, the relentless psychological torment of the White Room extracted valuable information. Since then, it seems the CIA have refined their techniques a bit. It's much cheaper to deprive a person of their senses using goggles and earphones and thick gloves than to build an entire room for them. But there are reports from Guantanamo Bay and other such facilities of all-white windowless rooms where prisoners are kept in solitary confinement for long periods of time with no idea of what time it is or how long they've been in there. Venezuela has their own version of these white torture rooms still in use today. 5 levels below ground, underneath the Venezuelan Intelligence Services headquarters, is a facility nicknamed La Tumba, or the Tomb. In 7 tiny, white, windowless cells, political prisoners are subjected to bright light 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They soon lose all sense of time. Air conditioning units keep the rooms chilled like a refrigerator. The beds are a hard concrete slab. Prisoners complain of hallucinations, panic attacks, and suicidal thoughts. Lawrence Salah is either a far-right terrorist or a human rights activist, depending on whether you believe the Venezuelan or the Western press. He was sent to La Tumba in 2014. In an interview, he describes the experience. When we talk about white torture, we talk about all the ways to inflict severe pain on a person without leaving physical scars. And how can this be possible? Light, for example, can cause pain. 1 hour under intense light, they do not bother. Maybe 12 hours, it starts to bother a bit. 24 hours in front of a computer bothers your eyes. But what happens when you've been in bright light for weeks or months? Both hot and cold temperatures can cause you a lot of pain. Subjecting yourself to low temperatures generates numbness, and you reduce the individual without even touching him. Disorient him, then he doesn't know what time it is, whether it's day or night. After spending a year in this cell, Laurent attempted to commit suicide, but he was caught by the guards. He would remain in La Tomba for a total of 4 years without trial, and then he was released. There's actually a decent short film called La Tomba, which illustrates what it was like for Laurent and the other prisoners in these cells. There's another short film I can recommend called La Vanne. I'm not sure whether to describe this film as sci-fi, but it's definitely set in a more fictional world than the La Tomba short movie, but it does feature a white torture cell. I'll put links to both of these films in the description. I think it's interesting to get a glimpse of what it's like to endure white torture, but I think it's one of those things that unless you actually experience it for yourself, you won't understand how horrible it actually is. In this video I read out a few first-hand descriptions from people who had undergone white torture, and it's probably quite telling how short these descriptions were. Some of them spent years in these cells, and yet they only have a few short paragraphs to describe it. I think this more than anything conveys the monotonous sameness of the experience. Even after going through it, you have very little to say, because absolutely nothing happened. It's an experience that goes beyond boredom. The mind shuts down, unable even to daydream. One long nothingness, stretched out till it feels like an eternity. It's living death. So, thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it interesting. Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Shout out to everyone who is supporting the channel on Patreon and PayPal. The help is highly appreciated, so thank you very much. And if you want some more content, there's loads of good stuff on my channel, or you could check out those short films I mentioned. Like I say, there should be links in the description if I've remembered. And thanks once again for watching. I appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, goodbye.